Savannah thought she understood heartbreak, but nothing prepared her for the moment Travis leaned across the diner table and told her the twins growing inside her were not his problem. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't flinch. He simply pushed his empty coffee cup aside, stood up, and left her sitting there with strangers watching like it was a reality show. No long explanations. No remorse. Just abandonment, served as casually as a morning breakfast. That day, Savannah became a single mother. Not by choice, but by betrayal. The weeks that followed were unforgiving. She gave birth to Liam and Ava with no hand to hold, no flowers waiting by her hospital bed, bills stacked higher than the formula cans on her kitchen counter. Friends who once promised to be aunties for life quietly disappeared when the cries of two infants replaced late-night hangouts. Even her landlord treated her like an intruder, reminding her that eviction was just one missed payment away. There were nights she rocked one child in her arms while using her foot to bounce the carrier of the other, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She told them she'd never abandon them, even as her own body begged for rest she couldn't afford. But the world has a way of testing how much pain one heart can carry. And Savannah was close to her breaking point. It happened on a cold evening inside a crowded hospital. Ava's fever had spiked, her tiny body burning against Savannah's chest as she sat on a hard plastic chair in the emergency waiting area. Hours dragged on. The air smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion. She was seconds from tears when heavy footsteps stopped in front of her. Savannah looked up and saw a man she didn't recognize at first. He was tall, sharply dressed, and carried himself with the kind of presence that made people step aside without him asking. His name, though she wouldn't know it until later, was Julian Carter. The nurses, who had ignored Savannah's desperate pleas all evening, suddenly moved when Julian spoke. One phone call, one command, and Ava was seen by a doctor within minutes. Savannah sat frozen, her mind spinning, as if the universe had sent her an unlikely guardian. Julian didn't ask for thanks. He didn't hover. He simply stood nearby, watching Savannah with an intensity that unsettled her. When he finally spoke, his words were simple but piercing. He asked where the children's father was. Savannah wanted to lie, but the truth spilled out too easily. Their father had left the moment he found out. Julian's reaction was not pity, nor the smug satisfaction of a man who thought himself a hero. Instead, he gave a short nod, like someone confirming something they already suspected, and muttered, "Then he's a fool." That sentence, delivered without hesitation, lodged itself in Savannah's chest. It wasn't meant to comfort, yet it did. When the doctor returned with news that Ava was stable, relief washed over Savannah like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. She thanked the doctor, thanked anyone who would listen. But before she could find the words to thank Julian, he slipped a business card into her hand. No explanation, no insistence, just a quiet offer. And then he was gone. It was only when she finally looked down at the card that the weight of the encounter hit her. Julian Carter. Carter Enterprises. The name alone carried a kind of power that echoed through the city. Wealth, influence, untouchable status. And now, impossibly, that name was connected to her and her children. That night, as Savannah tucked the twins into bed, she stared at the card on her nightstand. She didn't know why he had stepped in. She didn't know what he wanted. But she knew her life had shifted in a way she couldn't yet explain. Because billionaires don't casually step into the lives of struggling single mothers. Not without reason. And though she couldn't see it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would turn betrayal into protection, abandonment into belonging, and loneliness into a bond stronger than blood. Julian Carter hadn't just noticed her twins. He had already started to claim them. Savannah kept Julian Carter's business card tucked inside the worn leather wallet she carried everywhere. At first, she told herself it was nothing, just a piece of paper, a symbol of a stranger's fleeting kindness. But late at night, when the twins were finally asleep, she'd find herself staring at the embossed letters, tracing the weight of his name with her thumb. Why would a man like that notice someone like her? A billionaire didn't walk into the chaos of an overworked hospital and hand out personal cards like candy. No, it meant something, and Savannah hated herself for wondering what that something was. She didn't call him. Not yet. Pride was the only thing she still had intact, and she guarded it fiercely. She wasn't going to be another desperate woman throwing herself at a man with money. She'd seen too many lives unravel that way. But the universe had a cruel sense of humor. 2 weeks after the hospital incident, Savannah's landlord kept his promise. She came home to find a bright orange eviction notice plastered across her apartment door. 3 days. That was all the time she had to find somewhere else for herself and the twins. Her first instinct was to call her sister. The conversation lasted barely 2 minutes. Her sister's voice was sharp, dismissive. "You chose him, Savannah. You chose wrong. Don't drag me into your mess." The line went dead before Savannah could even respond. She sat on the floor, her back pressed against the locked door of the only home her babies had ever known, and listened to their soft breathing from the stroller. A lump rose in her throat, so heavy it felt like it might choke her. For the first time, she allowed the thought she had fought so hard to suppress. Maybe I can't do this alone. Her wallet felt heavy. The card was still inside. That night, Savannah dialed the number with shaking fingers. She almost hung up after the first ring, but his voice came through the speaker, deep, smooth, unmistakably calm. Julian Carter. She froze. Every practiced line of what she was going to say disappeared. I don't even know why I'm calling," she admitted, her voice cracking. There was silence on the other end, but not the kind that judged. The kind that waited. Finally, he spoke. "Yes, you do." It wasn't a question. And somehow, she knew he was right. Within 24 hours, a black SUV pulled up outside her crumbling apartment building. Savannah hesitated on the sidewalk, clutching the twins close as if someone might try to snatch them away. The driver stepped out, polite but efficient, and opened the door. Julian was inside. He didn't greet her with charm or small talk. Instead, his eyes went immediately to the children, resting peacefully in their carriers. For a moment, something softened in his expression, something Savannah hadn't expected from a man whose face she'd only ever seen on magazine covers, always framed by headlines about mergers, deals, and ruthless ambition. "You're being evicted," he said simply, as if he had known before she even told him. Savannah bristled. "I didn't call you for pity." "No," Julian agreed. "You called me because you were out of options." The words stung, but they weren't cruel. They were matter of fact. She hated that he was right. The ride was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional fuss of a baby. Savannah stared out the window, her thoughts a storm. Why was she in his car? Where was he taking her? She should have asked, but something about the certainty in his voice made it impossible. When the SUV pulled through iron gates and stopped in front of a sprawling estate, Savannah's breath caught. The mansion before her looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine. Columns stretched into the sky. Glass windows reflected the last light of day, and the driveway alone was bigger than her entire apartment building. "This is temporary," Julian said, stepping out first, "until you figure out your next step." Temporary. The word offered comfort and threat at the same time. Inside, the mansion wasn't just luxury for show. It was built to impress, yes, but every detail was lived in, intentional. A fireplace flickered against dark wood. The faint scent of leather and cedar filled the air. Even the nursery upstairs, which Julian's staff had prepared in less than a day, was more thoughtful than anything Savannah could have imagined. Cribs stood side by side, draped in soft fabrics. A rocking chair sat by the window. Shelves already lined with children's books and toys. It was overwhelming. Savannah stood frozen at the doorway, her hands tightening around the straps of the baby carriers. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "You already have," Julian replied from behind her. His tone wasn't arrogant. It was steady, as if the decision had already been made the moment she dialed his number. And that was when she realized the unsettling truth. This wasn't charity. Julian Carter didn't move like a man doing favors. He moved like a man claiming what was his. Savannah turned to face him, searching his eyes for answers. "Why?" she asked. Her voice trembled. "Why are you doing this for me? For us?" For the first time since they met, Julian hesitated. His jaw tightened. He looked at the twins before meeting her gaze again. Because no child should grow up wondering if they were unwanted, he said finally. I won't let that happen. The conviction in his tone sent a shiver through her. She should have felt relief, gratitude, safety. But instead, she felt something else too, suspicion. Because no one gave this much without wanting something in return. That night, as the twins slept peacefully in a nursery far too grand for them, Savannah lay awake in a bed softer than clouds and stared at the ceiling. The mansion was quiet, but her mind was not. She didn't trust him. She couldn't trust him. And yet, she knew one thing with terrifying clarity. Julian Carter had not stepped into her life to be a passing savior. He had stepped in to stay, and whether she liked it or not, he was beginning to claim more than just her babies. Savannah woke the next morning to a silence that unsettled her. No banging pipes. No neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that didn't belong to her world. The bed beneath her felt too soft, too forgiving, and when she sat up, the sunlight pouring through the wide windows seemed almost unreal. For a moment, she forgot the twins were down the hall in a nursery designed by strangers. Panic gripped her until she scrambled barefoot to their room. They were there, safe, sleeping peacefully beneath plush blankets that looked like they belonged in a palace. Relief flooded through her, but it was laced with unease. Because this wasn't her life. This was borrowed space, borrowed air, and she couldn't shake the feeling that every second here came with a hidden price. Julian was already awake when she stepped downstairs. He stood by the grand window of his study, dressed immaculately in a tailored suit, coffee in hand, as if he hadn't just rearranged his life to accommodate a woman and 2 infants he barely knew. "You're up early," he said without looking at her. His tone was casual, but Savannah heard something beneath it. Awareness, maybe even expectation. "I didn't sleep much," she admitted, pulling her robe tighter around her frame. "I'm not used to this." His gaze shifted to her, sharp and assessing. "You'll get used to it." The word sounded more like a command than reassurance. She opened her mouth to protest, but the twins' cries broke the tension. Savannah excused herself quickly, grateful for the distraction. Yet, as the days stretched on, she realized something alarming. Julian was everywhere. Not in an overbearing way. He wasn't hovering or intruding. But somehow, every time she turned a corner, there he was. Watching, observing. His presence filled the mansion the way sunlight filled the windows. Constant, unignorable. When the twins cried, he appeared. When she struggled with bottles, he called for the housekeeper before she could refuse. And when she tried to sneak outside to breathe fresh air, she found him already seated on the terrace, as if he had been waiting. "Why are you doing this?" Savannah finally asked one afternoon, her frustration bubbling. "Why me? Why them?" Julian set down his glass of water with deliberate calm. His eyes locked onto hers, unflinching. "Because you're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "And because those children deserve someone who won't walk away." His words pierced her like a blade. She thought of Marcus, the father of her twins, and the last conversation they'd had before he disappeared. His voice, cold and detached, still echoed in her memory. "They're your problem, Savannah, not mine." She had begged him then, swallowing every ounce of pride, but he had only smirked before walking out of her life. No apologies, no second glance. Julian's conviction was the opposite of Marcus's abandonment, and that terrified her, because part of her wanted to believe him, but another part whispered, men always want something. Days turned into weeks, and Savannah's life became a strange mix of comfort and anxiety. She had space, food, safety, things she hadn't had in months. But with every kindness Julian offered, her suspicion deepened. Then came the first twist. A letter. It arrived in a crisp envelope, tucked into the morning's mail. Savannah wouldn't have seen it if she hadn't passed through the foyer at the exact moment the maid placed it on the table. Her name was scrawled across the front. No return address. She opened it with trembling hands. "You don't belong there." That was all it said. No signature, no explanation. Just 5 words that sent chills down her spine. Julian noticed her pale face as she tucked the letter behind her back. "What is it?" he asked, his tone sharper than usual. "Nothing. She lied quickly, forcing a smile. Just junk. But his eyes lingered, dark and probing, as if he knew she was hiding something. That night, she slipped the letter beneath her pillow, unable to shake the sense that someone, or something, was watching. The next evening, Savannah discovered another truth she wasn't ready for. She was in the nursery, humming softly to the twins, when she overheard Julian speaking on the phone down the hall. His voice was low, controlled, but the words carried. No, I won't let him near them. He lost that right the moment he walked away. Savannah froze. Him. Her chest tightened. He couldn't mean, but he did. Marcus. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Julian knew about Marcus. He knew more than she had ever told him. Her hands shook as she laid the twins down, her mind spinning. How long had he known? How much did he know? And why hadn't he told her? She wanted to confront him, but fear held her back. Because if Julian knew about Marcus, then he wasn't just helping her out of generosity. He was playing a game she didn't understand. The tension between them grew heavier after that. Savannah tried to keep her distance, but Julian had a way of closing it without effort. One night, after the twins had finally fallen asleep, she found him waiting for her in the dimly lit kitchen, sleeves rolled up, a glass of whiskey in hand. You're restless, he said simply, not a question, but a statement. You're hiding something, she shot back, surprising even herself. For a long moment, they stared at each other, the silence thick with unspoken truths. Then Julian stepped closer, his voice lowering to something dangerous and intimate. I know what he did to you. I know what he left behind. And I won't let him come back and take what he abandoned. Her heart pounded. The words should have comforted her, but instead they stirred something deeper, something she didn't want to name. Why do you care? She whispered. Julian's eyes softened for the first time that night. Because no one cared when it should have mattered. The distance between them shrank until Savannah could feel the heat of him, the certainty of him. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. Julian Carter wasn't just claiming her twins. He was beginning to claim her. But just as that truth settled into her chest, the phone rang. Loud, piercing, cutting through the fragile moment. Julian answered without hesitation. His expression hardened, his jaw clenching as he listened. When he finally hung up, his voice was clipped, colder than she had ever heard it. He's back. Savannah's blood ran cold. She didn't need to ask who. She already knew. Marcus, the man who had abandoned her. The man who had walked away from his children. The man who now threatened to return. And suddenly, Savannah understood. This wasn't just about safety anymore. This was about survival. The air in Julian's mansion thickened after that phone call. His words, he's back, refused to leave Savannah's ears. She carried them into her sleep, where they twisted into nightmares of Marcus pounding on doors, reaching for the twins, tearing them away from her arms while she screamed. By morning, the mansion no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a fortress under siege. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Doors that once opened easily now required codes, and Julian's presence became even more constant. He moved with the precision of a man preparing for war, and though Savannah never asked, she knew the enemy's name, Marcus. Yet Marcus did not appear right away. His absence stretched into days that felt like months, and in that silence, Savannah's fear grew teeth. Every shadow outside the window seemed to hide him. Every unknown number calling the house made her heart lurch. And then there was Julian. He didn't press her with questions, but his eyes searched her constantly, as if he was reading truths she couldn't say aloud. Sometimes his protectiveness felt like a shield. Other times it felt like a cage. The letter still hid beneath her pillow, its 5 words echoing louder each day. You don't belong there. But she couldn't bring herself to tell him. Not yet. The storm finally broke on a Wednesday afternoon. Savannah had just put the twins down for their nap when the sound of raised voices shattered the uneasy calm. She rushed to the staircase, her pulse thundering, and froze at the sight below. Marcus. He stood in the foyer, shoulders squared, his smirk exactly as she remembered. That same smirk that had crushed her when he abandoned them. Now was back, smug and hungry. Savannah, he drawled, as if they were old friends meeting by chance. You look good. Better than I expected. Her stomach churned. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand how he dared to stand there. But before she could find her voice, Julian stepped forward. "Leave," Julian said flatly. "No greetings, no pleasantries, just steel." Marcus chuckled. "Is this the billionaire babysitter I've been hearing about?" His gaze flicked around the grand entrance, the marble floors, the luxury. Quite the upgrade from that shoebox you were living in, Save. The casual cruelty of his words made her tremble. But Julian's jaw tightened, and his voice cut through the tension. "They're not yours anymore. You made that choice." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "They're my blood. Don't forget that." Savannah finally found her voice, brittle but sharp. "Blood doesn't make you a father." The silence that followed was suffocating. Julian placed himself subtly between her and Marcus, his stance protective, commanding. For a moment, Marcus's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "I'll be back," he promised, his tone venomous. "This isn't over." Then he was gone, the echo of the slammed door rattling through her bones. That night, Savannah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the letter again. The warning made sense now. Marcus had allies, maybe even someone inside the mansion feeding him information. The thought made her skin crawl. Julian entered without knocking, his presence heavy in the dim light. "You shouldn't have come down earlier," he said quietly. "You should have stayed with the twins." She looked up sharply. "I won't hide from him. Not again." His eyes softened briefly, then hardened. "You don't understand the kind of man Marcus is now. He's desperate, dangerous, and you're not." She snapped before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air like smoke. Julian froze, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he stepped closer, his voice low. "I may be many things, Savannah, but I don't abandon people when they need me most." Her breath caught. His words carved into the raw wound Marcus had left, filling it with something terrifying. Hope. But hope was dangerous. 2 days later, another blow landed. A lawyer arrived at the mansion, crisp suit, sharp briefcase, and papers that dripped with venom. Marcus had filed for custody. The shock nearly knocked Savannah to her knees. Marcus, who had spat at the idea of fatherhood, who had left her alone in the darkest nights, now wanted to claim the twins? Julian read the documents silently, his expression carved from stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was like ice. "He won't win." But Savannah's heart didn't believe it. Courts didn't care about abandonment, about late-night tears and broken promises. They care about names on birth certificates, about money and influence. And Marcus, cunning as he was, would twist every fact into a weapon. That night, Savannah couldn't sleep. She wandered into the nursery, watching her babies breathe in their tiny, peaceful rhythm. Her chest ached at the thought of losing them. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. "He won't take them." Julian stood in the doorway, shadows cutting across his face. He stepped inside slowly, his gaze locked on the twins, then on her. "I promise you, Savannah," he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "As long as I'm here, no one will take them. Or you." The words settled heavy between them. She wanted to believe him desperately. But the more he promised, the more she feared what it might cost. The twist didn't stop there. The next morning, as she dressed the twins, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Savannah." Marcus's voice slithered through the line. "You're playing house with him, aren't you? Do you really think he cares about you? About them? He's not your savior, Save. He's your jailer. You'll see soon enough." Her hand shook as she ended the call. She turned and nearly screamed when she saw Julian leaning in the doorway, watching her. "Who was that?" he asked, his tone calm but dangerous. She swallowed hard. No one. But he didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. For the first time, doubt pierced the fragile bond growing between them. Because what if Marcus was right? What if Julian's claim over her twins wasn't about love or protection, but control? That night, Savannah found herself unable to sleep again. She wandered into the library, hoping the silence of books might quiet her mind. But instead, she found Julian there, seated by the fire, glass of whiskey untouched beside him. He looked up as she entered, and something in his gaze made her chest tighten. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. He stood slowly, crossing the room until he was only inches away. His voice was a murmur, heavy with something she couldn't name. "Because I don't want to lose you." The words hit harder than any promise. She wanted to believe them. She wanted to lean into him, to let the fire between them burn away her doubts. But Marcus's voice still echoed in her head. "He's not your savior. He's your jailer." And in that tug of war, Savannah realized the most dangerous truth of all. She didn't know which man to fear more. The days following Marcus's return felt like walking through a minefield. Every hour brought a new sense of danger, as though the air itself was wired with tension, waiting for the wrong step to trigger an explosion. Savannah lived on edge. Every knock at the door made her flinch. Every unfamiliar face near the estate grounds sent her rushing to check on the twins. Her body existed in Julian's mansion, but her mind was caught between dread of Marcus and uncertainty about the man who had taken her in. Julian's confidence didn't falter. To the outside world, he moved with the unshakable poise of a billionaire, used to commanding boardrooms and bending rules to his will. But in the quiet moments when he thought no one was watching, Savannah caught glimpses of something harder, darker, simmering just beneath the surface. And that darkness scared her almost as much as Marcus. The first custody hearing was scheduled sooner than anyone expected. Marcus had money now, connections she didn't know about, and he used them like weapons. The paperwork accused her of unfit parenting, of recklessness, of living off another man's wealth instead of providing stability on her own. Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. They weren't just lies. They were carefully crafted attacks, designed to make her look irresponsible, designed to make her look like the very thing she feared becoming. Julian didn't flinch as he scanned the documents. He tossed them aside as if they were nothing but an insult. "He won't win," he said again, calm and certain. But Savannah wasn't certain. Courts cared about appearances, and Marcus had always been a master at playing the part he needed to play. He could smile at the judge, spin stories of regret, paint himself as a father desperate to make amends. And she knew too well how believable he could sound when he wanted to. Late that night, she sat by the nursery window, staring out into the darkness. The twins slept peacefully behind her, their tiny breaths steady and untroubled. But her own breaths came in uneven bursts. She whispered into the silence, not sure if she was speaking to herself or to the shadows. What if they believe him? The question haunted her until morning. Julian tried to shield her from the preparation for court, but Savannah demanded to be involved. She wanted to fight, to protect her children with her own voice, not just stand in Julian's shadow while he fought for her. That's when the real cracks began to show. In one meeting with the lawyer Julian had hired, Savannah noticed the attorney kept addressing Julian, barely looking at her. When she tried to speak, her words were brushed aside, redirected, as if she were a side character in her own story. She clenched her fists beneath the table, anger rising like fire in her chest. Afterward, she confronted Julian. "Why is he talking to you and not me? These are my children." Julian's jaw tightened. "Because he knows I can win this. Do you want to risk losing them because your pride got in the way?" The word struck like a slap. Her pride? That wasn't what this was. She wanted to be heard, to be seen, to stand for her babies with her own strength. But Julian's tone left no room for argument. And in that silence, Marcus's voice returned to her memory. "He's your jailer's save, not your savior." The night before the first hearing, another letter arrived. It was slipped under her bedroom door while she slept. She found it at dawn, folded neatly, waiting like a snake in the dark. This one had more than 5 words. "Do you really think he'll let you go once this is over? He's not protecting you. He's keeping you, and you're too blinded by gratitude to see it." Her hand shook as she read it. Someone was watching, close enough to reach her room, close enough to know her doubts. But who? Her mind spun with possibilities. A servant, a guard, maybe even someone Julian trusted completely. The thought made her chest tighten with panic. She wanted to show Julian the letter, but fear held her back. What if Marcus had written it? What if it was true? By the time she stood in court that afternoon, Savannah felt as if her skin were paper thin. The hearing was chaos dressed in formality. Marcus sat at the opposite table, clean-shaven, tailored suit, his smirk carefully replaced with a mask of regret. He played the role perfectly. The flawed man who had learned his lesson, the father begging for a second chance. Savannah wanted to scream as he spoke, to claw through the lies spilling from his lips. He told the judge about his struggles, about how he had been lost, but had returned stronger, ready to provide for his children. He even glanced toward her with feigned humility, as if she were part of his redemption story. Her nails dug in her palms so deeply they left crescent-shaped marks. Julian's attorney countered with precision, laying out Marcus's abandonment, the lack of financial support, the sudden and suspicious interest now that another man had stepped in. Julian himself sat tall, unshaken, his gaze locked on the judge like a man daring anyone to doubt him. When Savannah was asked to speak, her voice wavered at first. But then she thought of the nights alone with two screaming infants, the hunger, the shame, the tears no one saw. And she told the truth, every word of it. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Even Marcus's mask slipped for a moment, fury flashing in his eyes. But the judge didn't deliver a final ruling that day. The case was pushed to a later date, evidence requested, witnesses to be called. It was far from over. Back at the mansion, Savannah collapsed on her bed, her body trembling with exhaustion. The twins slept in their cribs, blissfully unaware of the war being fought over them. Julian entered quietly, watching her from the doorway. "You did well today," he said. Her eyes burned. "It's not over." "No," he agreed, stepping closer. "But you show them who you are. That matters." The sincerity in his tone broke something inside her. Tears spilled before she could stop them, and suddenly she was sobbing, all the fear and anger and exhaustion pouring out. Julian didn't hesitate. He crossed the room and pulled her against him. For a moment, she let herself collapse into his chest, his warmth grounding her, his steady heartbeat anchoring her frayed edges. She hated how safe it felt. She hated how much she wanted to stay there. When she finally pulled away, her face flushed, his eyes lingered on hers with a heat she couldn't ignore. "Savannah," he murmured, her name rough on his lips. Her heart thundered. She didn't know if he was about to kiss her or warn her, and part of her didn't care. But then a sharp noise broke the moment. The creak of a floorboard in the hallway. They both turned sharply. The hall was empty, but the unease that had been stalking her since the first letter surged back full force. Someone was in the house, and they were watching. The creak of that floorboard refused to fade from Savannah's mind. Long after the sound dissolved into silence, her body stayed rigid, every nerve alert. Someone had been standing just outside her room, listening. Julian stepped into the hallway, his footsteps quick and controlled, but when he returned minutes later, his expression gave nothing away. "Empty," he said. "Probably a servant." But Savannah didn't believe it. She had lived in this mansion long enough to know the rhythm of the staff, the pattern of their footsteps, the way they avoided late-night interruptions. No servant lingered outside her door at midnight. Her chest tightened as she lay awake that night. If someone was bold enough to stand outside her bedroom, then the letters weren't just threats. They were warnings from someone inside these very walls. The following days felt like a performance on a stage she hadn't agreed to step onto. Guards moved with more urgency, staff whispered in corners, and Julian seemed sharper, colder, as if a shadow followed him too. Yet beneath the tension, the bond between them grew impossible to ignore. One evening, Savannah found herself in the kitchen after the twins had fallen asleep. She was making tea, her hands trembling slightly from the day's anxiety, when Julian entered. He looked almost human in that moment. His tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, the weight of the world pressing visibly on his shoulders. "You should be resting," he said softly. She tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "I can't remember the last time I actually rested." He stepped closer, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. "You're stronger than you know." The sincerity in his eyes made her chest ache. She wanted to lean into him, to let his certainty replace her doubt, but she pulled back instead. Because Marcus's words still haunted her. "He's not protecting you. He's keeping you." 2 days later, The illusion of safety shattered. The twins were napping in the nursery when Savannah noticed something strange. The baby monitor, usually silent unless they stirred, crackled faintly. She leaned closer, frowning, and her blood ran cold. A man's voice, low, muffled, speaking words she couldn't make out. Her heart pounded as she rushed into the nursery. The twins were safe, sleeping peacefully, but the window was slightly open. She hadn't opened it. Panic clawed at her throat. She scooped the babies into her arms and fled down the hall. By the time Julian reached her, she was trembling, breathless, unable to form words. When he finally pieced together her account, his expression turned murderous. "He's inside the house," Julian growled. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Marcus wasn't just watching from afar. He had infiltrated the walls of the one place meant to protect them. That night, the mansion transformed into something unrecognizable. Every window was locked, every corridor patrolled. Julian barked orders into his phone, summoning private security teams, his voice sharp and ruthless. But Savannah couldn't shake the image of the open window, the crackle of the monitor, the faint sound of a man's voice. It replayed in her head on a loop until it made her sick. And then the worst thought hit her. What if it wasn't Marcus? What if it was someone closer? Sleep eluded her, so she wandered the dim hallways. Her bare feet padded silently against marble, the house eerily quiet despite the added security. She passed the study and froze. Julian was inside, speaking on the phone. His back was to her, his shoulders tense. No, she can't know. Not yet. It will ruin everything. Her blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall, heart racing. Who was he talking about? What couldn't she know? The conversation ended quickly, Julian's voice low, clipped. He turned slightly, and for a terrifying second, she thought he'd spotted her. But his attention was elsewhere, his mind clearly heavy with secrets. Savannah slipped back into her room before he could catch her, her body shaking. The second letter's warning screamed in her head. He's not protecting you. He's keeping you. The next day, Marcus struck again, not with violence, but with charm. A package arrived for Savannah. No name, no sender, just a box tied with a neat ribbon. Inside, a framed photo of her, taken years ago, back when Marcus had first courted her. She was smiling in the picture, eyes bright, unaware of the storm that man would one day drag her into. Beneath the photo was a note. "Remember who you were with me. You don't belong in his world. Come back, and I'll forgive everything. Forgive everything." As if his abandonment, his cruelty, his sudden claim on the twins were sins she had committed, not him. Her hands shook as she shoved the box away, but the damage was done. Doubt wormed deeper in her chest. Julian found her later, pale and shaken, and demanded to know what was wrong. She couldn't bring herself to tell him. Not after hearing his late-night phone call. Not with the letters whispering in her mind. Instead, she lied. "It's nothing." But the distance between them widened, invisible but unyielding. The second custody hearing loomed, and with it, new pressure. Marcus's lawyer had produced witnesses, people from Savannah's past, ready to testify against her. Old neighbors who remembered her struggling, strangers who could be convinced she was unstable. Julian doubled down, working long hours with his attorneys, plotting strategies she couldn't understand. But to Savannah, it felt less like a rescue and more like a takeover. She wanted to fight with her own voice, but the machinery of Julian's world left little room for her. She was a passenger in a battle for her own children. One night, overwhelmed, she slipped into the garden for air. The night was cool, the sky sharp with stars. For the first time in weeks, she felt alone enough to breathe, until a shadow moved behind her. She spun, heart racing, and froze. Marcus. He stood just beyond the hedges, his smirk glinting in the moonlight. "You're not safe here, Save," he whispered, his voice carrying across the garden. "You never were." Her throat closed, terror locking her in place. Before she could scream, guards stormed the garden, and Marcus vanished into the night like smoke. Julian arrived seconds later, fury etched across his face. He grabbed Savannah's shoulders, searching her eyes. "Did he touch you? Did he say anything?" She shook her head, trembling. "He was just there, Julian pulled her against him, his embrace fierce, almost desperate. I won't let him win. Do you hear me? I won't let him. For the first time, she felt his fear, not of Marcus, but of losing her. And that terrified her even more. That night, lying awake in bed, Savannah realized the truth she had been avoiding. She was trapped between two men, one who had abandoned her, one who had saved her, but both of them wanted to claim her, and she no longer knew which claim was more dangerous. The morning after Marcus's appearance in the garden, the mansion felt less like a sanctuary and more like a prison. Guards lined the corridors, surveillance cameras blinked in corners, and still Savannah felt unsafe. The twins giggled in their playpen, their laughter a fragile reminder of innocence in a world where nothing else was pure. Savannah bent to kiss their foreheads, but her hands trembled. She kept replaying Marcus's words, "You're not safe here. You never were." Those words weren't just a threat. They were a promise. Julian noticed her unease. He leaned against the doorframe, his shirt open at the collar, his eyes fixed on her with quiet intensity. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. But Savannah couldn't forget what she overheard in his study. She can't know. Not yet. It will ruin everything. So she smiled faintly, masking the storm inside her. "I'm not alone. I have the twins." Julian studied her a moment longer, as if sensing the wall she was building, before turning away. "The hearing's in 3 days. We'll be ready." But we felt fragile on her lips. That afternoon, a maid tripped in the hallway, spilling a tray of glasses. Shards skittered across the floor. The sound startled Savannah so badly she nearly screamed. The maid whispered apologies, but Savannah barely heard. Her eyes had locked onto something that had slipped from the maid's pocket when she fell. A small, black earpiece. Her blood froze. The maid scrambled to snatch it up, but Savannah's reflexes were faster. She kicked the piece under her foot and pressed it down before the woman could retrieve it. Their eyes met. The maid's face drained of color. Before Savannah could speak, Julian's head of security appeared, barking at the staff. The maid bolted down the corridor, disappearing into the servants' wing. Savannah bent down and picked up the earpiece with shaking hands. There was a spy in the mansion, and she had just exposed her. When Julian heard, his fury was volcanic. He slammed his fist against the desk in his office, the sound vibrating through the marble floors. "She worked here for months," he snarled, "and I didn't see it. I didn't." Savannah flinched at his rage, but underneath it, a darker thought coiled. If Marcus had planted that maid, then how many others were watching her? And more importantly, why hadn't Julian noticed? She hesitated, then asked, "What if she wasn't working for Marcus?" Julian's eyes snapped to hers. "Then who?" Savannah swallowed hard. She didn't dare voice the thought clawing her mind. What if she was working for you? That night, Savannah couldn't sleep. She walked the hallways like a restless ghost, the silence heavy around her. Her bare feet carried her to the study again. She paused at the door, her heart pounding, half expecting to hear Julian's voice whispering secrets on the phone. But the study was empty. The desk lamp still glowed, and papers were scattered across the mahogany surface. She shouldn't have entered. She knew that, but something stronger than fear pulled her in. Her hands brushed across files stamped with legal seals, letters with her name highlighted, even photographs of her holding the twins at the hospital the day they were born. And then she saw it, a sealed envelope with her ex's name scrawled across the front. Marcus Hale. Her heart lurched. She tore it open. Inside was a legal document, an agreement drafted weeks ago, never signed, that detailed shared custody terms between Marcus and Julian. Her chest tightened. The room swam. Julian and Marcus. Working together? A sound behind her made her whirl. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" His voice was calm, too calm. Savannah clutched the papers like a lifeline. "Why do you have this? Why is there an agreement with him?" Julian stepped forward slowly, his gaze fixed on her trembling hands. "You weren't supposed to see that." Her stomach dropped. "So it's true? You and Marcus?" "No." Julian cut in sharply. "It's not what you think." Her laugh cracked, bitter and broken. "Then tell me what it is, because from where I'm standing, It looks like you've been making deals behind my back while promising to protect me. Julian closed the distance between them, his voice low but fierce. Do you think I'd let him near you? Near the twins? That document was leverage. Insurance. Something to hold over him if he pushed too far. Savannah searched his face, desperate for truth, but doubt clung stubbornly to her. And the phone call? Who were you talking to that night? Julian's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. Her silence was louder than any scream. The following day brought another blow. Marcus arrived at the courthouse unannounced, not for the hearing, but to file an emergency motion. He claimed the twins were unsafe under Julian's roof, citing evidence of intruders, secret staff, and surveillance failures. The irony was brutal. Marcus himself was the chaos, yet he wielded it as a weapon. Savannah sat in the passenger seat of Julian's car, her hands cold, her throat dry. The city blurred outside the tinted windows, but inside, the silence between her and Julian was suffocating. Finally, she whispered, "What if he wins?" Julian didn't look at her, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He won't, but she wasn't sure if he was reassuring her or himself. That night, the mansion grew restless. Guards argued in hushed tones, phones buzzed with updates from lawyers, and tension crackled through the air like static. Savannah sat in the nursery, rocking one of the twins, her eyes burning with exhaustion. Then a soft tap on the glass. Her heart nearly stopped. She turned toward the window. Marcus's face stared back at her from the darkness outside, his smirk cruel, his eyes burning with possession. Before she could scream, the lights flickered and went out. The entire mansion plunged into darkness. Chaos erupted. Guards shouted, flashlights cut through shadows, and doors slammed. Savannah clutched the twins, her body trembling violently. In the darkness, she heard again that voice. Marcus's voice. "You're mine, Save. You've always been mine." She bolted into the hallway, her only thought to run. But the darkness wasn't empty. Footsteps echoed behind her, fast, heavy, closing in. And then a hand grabbed her wrist. She gasped, spinning, ready to fight, only to find Julian's face inches from hers, his breath ragged. "I've got you," he whispered. But for the first time, she wasn't sure if being in his arms meant safety or surrender. The blackout didn't end quickly. For 7 minutes, the mansion drowned in darkness, its silence broken only by the shouts of guards and the occasional slam of hurried footsteps. Savannah clung to Julian's arm, the twins pressed against her chest, her breath shallow and fast. The only light came from Julian's phone flashlight, a trembling circle that revealed more fear than safety. "Keep moving," Julian ordered, his voice low, urgent. "We need to get to the safe room." But Savannah's mind replayed Marcus's face at the nursery window, the taunting curve of his smile. If he could get that close, then no wall, no guard, no promise was strong enough to keep him out. The safe room was hidden behind a panel in the library, a steel chamber dressed as luxury, complete with a crib, food, monitors, and reinforced doors. When the lights finally flickered back on across the estate, Julian's security team confirmed what she already feared. Someone had cut the power from inside. The spy wasn't just a maid with an earpiece. This ran deeper. Julian paced the room like a caged lion, fury radiating from him. "He's trying to break us from within. He wants you scared, doubting, weak." Savannah sat in the corner, rocking one of the twins, her hands cold despite the heat pressing against her skin. "He doesn't have to try," she whispered. Julian froze. His eyes darkened, and in that silence, the truth slipped between them. She didn't just doubt Marcus anymore. She doubted him too. The next morning, the mansion returned to its glittering facade, but Savannah saw through it. Every polished surface looked staged, every smiling staff member a suspect. Julian called in reinforcements, a cybersecurity team, new investigators, even a former FBI agent. Cameras were rewired, guards doubled. But protection felt more like surveillance. At breakfast, Savannah pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. Julian reached for her hand across the table. "You're not eating." She withdrew slightly. "I can't. knowing he was inches away from the babies. "I'll end this, Savannah." His voice was low, steady. "I swear it." She looked into his eyes and saw determination, but also something harder: obsession, possession. And the words Marcus had whispered in the dark twisted inside her. "You've always been mine." Because wasn't Julian saying the same thing, just in another language? By midday, another storm brewed. Julian's lawyer arrived with papers. Evidence Marcus's team had leaked to the press. Photographs of Savannah leaving a clinic years ago. Private records twisted to look like proof of instability. "They're painting you as unfit," the lawyer said grimly. Savannah's chest constricted. "That's not true. It was nothing." But the truth didn't matter. The narrative did. And Marcus knew exactly which wounds to cut open. Julian slammed his hand on the table, eyes blazing. "He won't destroy you. Not while I'm breathing." His loyalty burned like fire, but Savannah's throat tightened. Loyalty wasn't love. Loyalty could still be control. That night, sleep came in fragments. Savannah drifted in and out, haunted by dreams of Marcus's smirk, Julian's cold calls, and faceless strangers lurking in her children's nursery. But just before dawn, she woke to something worse than dreams. A letter. It lay on the pillow beside her, stark against the white sheets. Her pulse raced. How had it gotten there? The room was locked. Guards stood outside. Yet the letter was real, its ink still smudged. Hands trembling, she unfolded it. "He'll never let you go, Save. He'll use the twins to bind you. And when he's done, he'll throw you away like everyone else. But I won't. Meet me. Midnight. The place where we first kissed." "Marcus." Savannah's vision blurred. Julian stirred beside her, his arm brushing hers. She shoved the letter under the sheets before he opened his eyes. "Couldn't sleep?" he murmured. She forced a weak smile. "Bad dream." But her heart hammered with something more dangerous than fear. A choice. The day dragged under the weight of secrets. Savannah replayed the letter in her head, every word a lure and a trap. She hated Marcus. She didn't trust him, but he had reached her bed. He had slipped past Julian's fortress. And that meant one thing. Someone inside was feeding him. That evening, she found herself staring at the staff as they cleared the dining table, her eyes scanning every gesture, every glance. Which of them carried her enemy's whispers into her sanctuary? Julian noticed her tension. After the staff left, he came closer, brushing his thumb across her cheek. "You're shaking." She drew back. "I can't tell who to trust anymore." He tilted her chin toward him, his voice almost a growl. "Then trust me." But trust wasn't something she could hand over like currency anymore. Not after the documents, the blackout, the letter on her pillow. By nightfall, Savannah made her decision. She wrapped the twins in their blankets, humming softly to settle them, her heart breaking with every note. She didn't know what awaited her if she went to Marcus, but she knew staying like this, caught between fear and control, would destroy her. When a mansion grew quiet, she slipped from her bed, letter tucked in her pocket, and padded silently down the hall. The air was thick, her nerves screaming with every step. She reached the side entrance and froze. Julian stood there. His silhouette filled the doorway, broad, immovable. His eyes found hers instantly, and the look in them told her everything. He knew. Going somewhere. His voice was soft, deadly calm. Her throat closed. She wanted to lie, to run, to fight. But the letter burned in her pocket like fire. Julian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "He's playing you, Savannah. Every step you take toward him is a step into his trap." Her voice cracked. "And what are you doing? Keeping me here like a prisoner? Making deals behind my back? Watching me through cameras?" For the first time, Julian's mask faltered. His voice broke. "I'm trying to keep you alive." Her chest tightened with something raw, aching, because in his eyes, she saw not just control, but desperation. A man terrified of losing the only thing that made him human. Still, the question clawed inside her. Was his love protection or possession? And then, before she could speak, a shout erupted from outside. Gunfire split the night. The mansion shook with chaos. Julian grabbed her hand, pulling her back. "He's here." Marcus wasn't knocking anymore. He was breaking the door down. The gunfire tore through the night like thunder. Windows rattled, alarms screamed, and the mansion, once a gilded cage, became a battlefield. Savannah's first instinct was the twins. She bolted toward the nursery, bare feet pounding against marble, Julian's voice chasing her. "Stay with me, Savannah." But she didn't stop. Every second mattered. The twins were her heartbeat, her reason, her only anchor in this madness. She burst into the nursery, chest heaving, and found them wide awake, startled by the chaos. Their cries cut through her like knives. She scooped them up, one in each arm, her body trembling. Behind her, Julian appeared, gun in hand, eyes sharp as steel. "Get to the safe room," he barked. "No," her voice cracked. "He won't stop, Julian. He'll never stop." His jaw clenched, fury flashing across his face. "Then I'll end him tonight." The halls filled with the sound of heavy boots. Julian's security clashed with intruders, their shouts echoing through the mansion. Shadows danced across the walls as muzzle flashes lit the dark. Savannah ran, clutching the twins, her breath ragged. The world blurred around her, reduced to survival. Keep running. Keep them safe. But as she turned a corner, she froze. Marcus. He stood at the far end of the corridor, calm amid the chaos, his tailored coat unbuttoned, his hands clasped behind his back like a man arriving for dinner rather than war. Their eyes met, and his smile chilled her blood. "Savannah," he said softly, his voice carrying over the din, "you came so close last night. Why didn't you?" Her legs nearly buckled. "Stay away from us." He stepped closer, unhurried. "You know you can't hide behind him forever. You know he'll keep you locked away, watchstoned. I'm the only one who sees you as more than a prize." Julian's voice thundered behind her. "You're the only threat she needs saving from." Marcus's eyes flicked past her. "Julian." He said the name like a curse. Julian raised his weapon, steady cold. "You won't walk out of here alive." Savannah's heart hammered between them, the twins crying in her arms. Two men, both claiming her, both willing to burn the world to keep her. And she realized, tonight, someone wouldn't survive. The battle surged around them. Guards clashed with Marcus's men, the mansion groaning under the weight of violence. Glass shattered, doors splintered, walls bore the scars of bullets. Julian pulled Savannah into the safe room, the steel door slamming shut. Inside, the twins cried louder, their tiny bodies trembling against hers. She tried to soothe them, but her own fear leaked through every whispered lullaby. Julian paced like a predator, gun still in hand. "He won't stop until I bury him." Savannah's voice broke. "And what if you can't?" Julian turned, his eyes burning into hers. "Then I'll die trying. But you and the twins, you will live." Something in his tone cut through her fear. It wasn't control. It wasn't possession. It was sacrifice. But she didn't have time to cling to that. Because suddenly, the monitors flickered, the surveillance cameras inside the mansion showing Marcus himself, walking calmly through the wreckage, his face lit by firelight from burning curtains. And he wasn't alone. The maid, the one who had dropped the earpiece. She followed him like a shadow, her eyes downcast, her loyalty clear. Savannah's stomach twisted. The spy hadn't been eliminated. She had let Marcus back inside. Julian swore under his breath and adjusted the gun in his grip. "He wants you to see him. He wants you afraid." On the monitor, Marcus stopped in the middle of the grand hallway, staring directly at the camera, as though looking into Savannah's eyes. He raised a hand, and with a snap of his fingers, his men dragged something into view. A man, bound, bloodied. Savannah gasped. It was Julian's head of security. Marcus smirked at the camera, lifted a knife, and pressed it against the man's throat. Then, without hesitation, he cut. Savannah cried out, covering the twins' eyes, as if that could shield them. Julian's face hardened into stone, but his voice was ice. "This ends now." He turned to Savannah, his hand gripping her shoulder. "Stay here. Don't open this door for anyone but me." Her eyes widened. "Julian, no. I have to," he said firmly. "If he gets through that door, none of us survive. Do you understand?" Tears blurred her vision, but she nodded. She couldn't stop him. Not this time. Julian kissed her forehead, lingering just long enough for her to feel the tremor in his breath. Then he slipped out, the steel door locking behind him. Savannah sank to the floor, the twins clinging to her, their cries raw and desperate. Her mind screamed with terror, with guilt, with memories. And then she saw it. The letter Marcus had left on her pillow, still tucked into her pocket. "Meet me. Midnight." Her fingers shook as she held it. Part of her wanted to rip it to pieces, but another part, the part drowning in fear, wondered if Marcus had been right. Maybe Julian wasn't protecting her. Maybe he was just binding her to him, using her fear to keep her close. The thought twisted deeper until she couldn't breathe. And then, faintly through the steel walls, she heard it. Julian's voice, shouting, gunfire, the heavy crash of bodies colliding, and Marcus's laughter. It was closer than it should have been. Too close. The monitors crackled again, showing the battle unfolding in the hallway outside. Julian and Marcus faced each other in brutal combat. Fists, gunshots, blood staining the marble. Julian fought with ferocity, every strike fueled by more than anger. By love, by desperation, by the refusal to lose her. Marcus fought with madness, his laughter echoing even as Julian's blows landed. He wanted to break Julian as much as he wanted Savannah back. Savannah's heart pounded as she watched. The twins screamed in her arms, and she whispered, "Please, please let this end." But the fight didn't end cleanly, because just as Julian pinned Marcus against the wall, ready to finish it, the spy maid appeared again, this time with a gun in her hands. She aimed at Julian. Savannah's scream tore through the safe room, though no one could hear it. The shot rang out. Julian staggered, blood blooming across his shoulder. Marcus grinned, seizing the moment to slam Julian into the wall. And Savannah realized, in horror, that the man fighting to save her might not live to see another dawn. Julian staggered, blood staining his shirt like a spreading shadow. The sound of the gunshot still hung in the air, sharp and merciless. His hand clutched his shoulder, but his eyes, fierce and unyielding, stayed locked on Marcus. Savannah screamed inside the safe room, her fists pounding the steel door. "Julian, no!" The twins wailed with her, their tiny voices piercing through the chaos, as though they too sensed their protector was faltering. Marcus smirked, his voice dripping with venom. "Look at you, the great Julian Sterling, billionaire prince, brought low by a servant's bullet." He tilted his head, mocking. "How long can you bleed before you break?" Julian spat blood, but his stance never wavered. "Long enough to finish you." The maid stepped forward, gun still aimed at Julian, her hands steady despite the carnage. Her eyes held no remorse, no fear, only devotion to Marcus. "Shoot him again," Marcus commanded smoothly, never taking his eyes off Julian. Her finger curled tighter around the trigger. And then, Savannah moved. Fueled by a mother's terror, she slammed the emergency override on the safe room door. It hissed open with a groan, and before she could think, she stepped into the hall, the twins clutched against her chest. "Stop!" Her voice was raw, desperate. "If you kill him, you kill me too." The maid froze. Julian's bloodied eyes widened. Marcus's smile widened like a predator's. "Ah," Marcus breathed, spreading his arms. "Finally, the woman I've been waiting for." Julian's voice cracked. "Savannah, get back." But she shook her head violently. "No, this ends now. No more hiding. No more running." Her gaze locked on Marcus, her voice trembling but fierce. "What do you really want? Me or them?" She lifted the twins slightly, her arms shaking. "Because if it's them, then you'll have to kill me first." Marcus's mask of calm slipped, just for a heartbeat. A flicker of obsession burned in his eyes as he stared at the babies, his so-called claim, his twisted right. He stepped forward, ignoring Julian's raised gun. "They are mine, flesh of my flesh, whether you admit it or not. He cannot give you what I can. He never could." Savannah's voice rose, breaking with fury. "They are not yours. They were never yours. And I was never yours either." Her words cut sharper than any blade. The maid, torn between Marcus's command and Savannah's defiance, hesitated. Her gun wavered. Julian saw his opening. Summoning what strength he had left, he lunged, slamming into Marcus. The gun fired, the bullet ricocheting into the wall. The corridor erupted into chaos. The twins cried louder, the sound drowning in the clash of bodies and the echo of gunfire. Julian and Marcus crashed to the floor, fists colliding, blood smearing across marble. Julian fought like a man with nothing to lose, every punch fueled by love, by rage, by the will to protect. Marcus fought like a man consumed by obsession, his laughter chilling even as Julian's blows landed harder. The maid tried to aim again, but Savannah, trembling, terrified Savannah, made a choice. She hurled a vase from the console table, smashing it into the maid's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor, sliding across the hall. The maid shrieked, clutching her wrist, but Savannah didn't stop. She kicked the weapon further away, then pressed her back against the wall, shielding the twins with her body. The fight reached its breaking point. Marcus, with one final surge, wrapped his hands around Julian's throat, pinning him to the ground. Julian's face reddened, his body straining, his gun slipping from his bloodied hand. Savannah screamed. Julian. Marcus's voice was guttural, triumphant. Say goodbye to your hero, Savannah. Tonight, the only name your children will know is mine. Julian's eyes began to dim, his breath faltering, and in that moment, something inside Savannah shattered. She shifted the twins to one arm, snatched up the fallen gun with the other, and leveled it at Marcus. Her hand shook, but her aim was true. Get off him, she said, her voice trembling with steel. Marcus looked up, disbelief flashing across his face. You wouldn't. Tears streaked down Savannah's cheeks. Try me. For a heartbeat, time froze. The twins sobbed. Julian's chest rose in shallow gasps beneath Marcus's crushing grip. The maid groaned in the corner, clutching her broken wrist. And Savannah, who had been abandoned, betrayed, and hunted, finally found her strength. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The gunshot echoed like thunder. Marcus's eyes widened, his body jerking back as the bullet tore through his chest. He stumbled, shock painting his face, blood staining his shirt. For the first time, Marcus was silent. No taunts, no laughter. Just silence. He collapsed onto the marble, lifeless. The gun clattered from Savannah's hand. She dropped to her knees beside Julian, the twins wailing in her arms. Julian, stay with me, she whispered frantically, pressing her free hand against his wound. Please, don't leave me. Don't leave us. Julian's eyes fluttered, his voice hoarse but steady. You saved me. Tears blurred her vision. We saved each other. His hand reached weakly toward the twins, brushing their tiny fingers. Tell them, I fought for them. For you. No, Savannah cried, shaking her head. Don't you dare talk like that. You're not done. Not with me. Not with them. Her voice cracked, but her resolve burned brighter. I won't let you go. Not now. Not ever. Sirens wailed in the distance. Reinforcements stormed the mansion, subduing the last of Marcus's men. Paramedics rushed in, prying Savannah from Julian just long enough to treat him. She clutched the twins, refusing to let them out of her sight. Her world had nearly crumbled, but in the wreckage, something new had risen, strength. As Julian was lifted onto a stretcher, his hand reached for hers. She held it tightly, refusing to let go. And in that grip, a promise was sealed, not spoken, not written, but carved into the very marrow of their souls. They had faced betrayal, abandonment, obsession. They had bled, fought, and nearly lost everything. But in the end, love endured. Weeks later, the mansion still bore scars, shattered glass, scorched walls, bloodstains scrubbed from marble. But the air was lighter, freer. Marcus was gone. The spy maid sat in prison, awaiting trial. And Julian, though scarred, healed slowly by Savannah's side. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Savannah stood in the garden with the twins. Julian joined her, his arms still bandaged, but his presence steady, strong. He looked at her, at them, and his voice was soft. You could have chosen him. You could have run. Why didn't you? Savannah met his gaze, tears glistening, but her smile steady. Because when everyone else abandoned me, you stayed. You fought, not for control, not for power, for us. That's what love is. Julian pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. The twins nestled between them. And for the first time, Savannah didn't feel trapped or hunted or broken. She felt safe. She felt whole. Together, they had survived the storm. And together, they would build a future no betrayal, no obsession, no enemy could ever take away. Please like, share, and subscribe to help me grow.